or in the face of mounting environmental challenges and worldwide sustainable development, stands as a guiding principle that harmonizes the need of the present generation without compromising the ability of future generations to meet their own needs. In alignment with this, the United Nations High-Level Political Forum of Sustainable Development was held in New York last week. St. Kitts and Nevis, as a member state of the United Nations, presented its very first voluntary national review at this forum. Here to tell us all about this are Auren Manners, Director of the Public Sector Investment Program, Cosbert Woods, UN Country Coordination Officer, Denaula Laplace, Communications and Research Officer in the Ministry of Environment, Climate Action and Constituency.
Thank you, kind sir.
Empowerment. You're welcome, ma'am.
So we're going to dive right into it, as we normally say. So let's talk about the overview of the 2030 agenda.
Thank you. So the 2030 agenda is a universal plan of action that focuses on people, prosperity, and planet. And it also focuses on peace and partnership. So it focuses on those, what we call the 5 Ps. There are 17 sustainable development goals.
Okay.
But to make it easier to remember, we divide those goals into the 5 Ps. So there are 5 sustainable development goals that focus on people, those that relate to poverty and zero hunger,
Okay.
and good health and well-being, education, etc., gender equality. Those that relate to prosperity, deal with economic growth, affordable energy, for example, and those that deal with planet, those that deal with climate action and access to water, things of that nature. And those that relate to peace, where we speak about, crime in society and the strength of our national institutions. And partnership speaks to how do we partner with other countries and other stakeholders, both outside of St. Kitts and inside of St. Kitts, to achieve the 2030 agenda.
Okay, so Auren, I must ask you think St. Kitts and Nevis is on its way to achieve all this by 2030?
So we did a national assessment for the past year and a half. I don't have to think. We actually did the groundwork. We hired a consultant to meet with different stakeholders across both St. Kitts and Nevis to ask them what they have been doing to achieve the SDGs. And that's the civil society, private sector,
Okay.
and government. And the assessment showed that those SDGs that are related to people, which is good health and well-being, education, reducing poverty, that St. Kitts and Nevis is doing quite well. In relation to planet, in terms of climate action and water, and those areas we're not doing as well. In regard to prosperity, which deals with economic growth and so forth, we're doing a little better fairly well.
Okay.
And we're also doing well in regard to peace, because there was a reduction in crime over the past 10 years, and also in regard to partnership. But what it shows is that there's a lot of work still to be done, because the SDGs run from 2015 to 2030.
Okay.
They were established in 2015, and we have 15 years to achieve the goals. And so we're at the halfway point, being that this is 2023.
Yes.
So although we've done relatively well, there's a need to accelerate our actions if we're going to fully achieve the goals.
Well said, well said.
Cosbert, I see you shaking your head over here. I want to touch especially on the one with climate change, because we have persons that come here all the time. They talk about not using the plastics, et cetera, but persons are still using plastics. The supermarkets, they have the bag, but the reusable bag. But to me, this is just my opinion, they're not enforcing it as they should, and they're still offering plastic bags. And I look at other individuals that go to the supermarket with their cool bags and with their reusable bags. So why isn't everybody taking it as serious as it should be with 7 years to go to 2030?
Well, I mean, that's a good question. And I think that while strides have been made by the government and other partners within society to embark on this sustainable island state agenda, which you would have heard the Prime Minister and other ministers of cabinet speak about, there's still some additional work to be done to get us over that hump, particularly when it comes to the environmental aspects, reducing the usage of minimizing usage of single-use plastic items, the styrofoam containers, that sort of thing, and so forth. So, we've been monitoring the situation carefully, providing guidance to the government in respect of these initiatives, also learning from other experiences that have taken place in other countries, because countries like Dominica, St. Lucia, Antigua and Barbuda have already put policies in place with regards to banning single-use plastics and so forth. So we're taking the guidance from those particular countries, learning from some of the challenges that they would have had, best practices, and trying to incorporate them into what we are doing here on the ground. So, it's a process, but the fact that the government has a plan, a strategy to undertake it, I think, they're on the right path towards achieving that. And hopefully, within the next couple of months, we can see some acceleration in that process.
Okay, good stuff.
So, Denaula, let me bring you into the conversation a bit. Recently, you would have represented the Federation at the high-level political forum. The United Nations hosted it. Can you give us an overview of what the experience was like representing the Federation?
I think it was quite a productive experience. Our delegation was diverse and we were well represented. Mr. Manners, myself, Ms. Nikira Nichols, who works alongside Mr. Woods as the youth advisor in the Youth Advisory Group for the United Nations. She also attended, as well as Minister Maynard and our permanent mission and the permanent secretary from the Ministry of Sustainable Development. So it was quite a productive experience. There were multiple side events in addition to the Voluntary National Review. So multiple countries presented their respective Voluntary National Reviews. And in addition to that, there was a high-level segment on the SDG Summit, which is coming up in September the 18th to the 19th of September. There were also side events, but also understand what other countries are doing and where other countries see spaces for growth as well. So I think it was a good experience.
Nice.
So we see that this is let's talk about the purpose of it. It says voluntary. So I am going to ask, is it that you just go and share your information? Is that the whole meaning of it?
Voluntary in the sense that you do not have to present, but it is encouraged. You would express your interest to the United Nations that you want to present this review, and then from there it's a process of getting approved for that, because multiple countries are vying for positions to present, because everyone wants to let everyone know what they're doing, what their challenges are, etc. So you have to go through that process first, and then upon getting approval, you would move to your national level coordination, planning, consultations, stakeholder engagement, etc. And then you would move to compile the document and do all of the other audiovisual material as well.
Got that.
If I may just quickly add to that, because I think Denaula was spot on. But just to double down and emphasize that one of the benefits of countries doing the Voluntary National Review is that they let the global community have an insight into what's happening on the ground with regards to implementing the various goals. And in addition to the other UN members, you also have the agencies, the UN agencies, funds and programs, development partners, donor agencies attending these forums. So they have great insight into what are some of the challenges, what are the strides being made in the country, what are the best practices, and by virtue of that, you have access to this whole community that can offer assistance and guidance and technical support to help address some of the challenges, to help to build on the progress that you've been making and so forth. So we encourage, the countries to undertake these initiatives as often as possible. In the case of St. Kitts and Nevis, we're a small island state, so it would be very taxing to do this on a regular basis. But some countries have actually done 3 and 4 voluntary national reviews so far, right? But I think it was a very good process for not only for us to share with the international community what's happening in St. Kitts and Nevis, but also for our national stakeholders to take stock of what's happening, the role that they have to play in regards to implementing the respective sustainable development goals and the associated indicators.
And just to add, there were actually 38 other countries who were presenting at this year's HLPF. In terms of the Caribbean, it was just us and Barbados. Barbados was presenting for the second time. I think we were the only first-time country. Yes. We had Guyana and 38 other countries, but we were one of the only countries presenting for the very first time. And as Cosbert said, the report is very important for local consumption because we want our people to know where we are with the SDGs and how they can contribute to acceleration.
So, Cosbert, were you instrumental in ensuring that stkitts participated this time for the very first time? Because I'm wondering why weren't we participating before?
Well, yes, as country coordination officers, that is one of my role and functions. So, with the support of my office, the UN Resident Coordination Office, and ECLAC, UN ECLAC, our regional office, because they was the one that provided the financial resources in terms of the consultant and resources to convene some of the workshops and validation sessions we had of the report. We were able to successfully execute this. A matter of fact, we were supposed to do it last year, but it actually fell within the midst of the ongoing elections at the time. So, it had to be postponed until this year, which was beneficial in the sense that we had additional time to collect more information, double back down and to get greater clarity on certain aspects or initiatives that were ongoing, and to even have deeper engagement with our stakeholders in Nevis, which was very critical to the process.
A specific question that I want to ask as well. You presented. I would like to know how or which agency at this presentation decide whether they're going to offer the grants or the funds to the small island developing nation.
I think I'm going to pass that to Cosbert. I feel like he's a better person to answer that question.
Alrighty. So Cosbert, you want to answer that now?
Sure. Okay. No problem. I mean, the simple answer I would give you is that the relevancy of the agencies, funds, and programs out there depends on the ability to service the member states and the countries of the United Nations. So when these countries make these presentations and outline some of their challenges, their priority areas, ongoing initiatives that they need additional resources for, then they have access to this information, and either through the permanent mission in New York or through my office, the Resident Coordination Office, we get into a deeper engagement in terms of how we can flesh this out into an actionable and impactful program at the national level. There's also a systematic way in terms of doing this, in the sense that we have country implementation plans, which would have been developed jointly between the National Coordination Ministry, which is Mr. Manner's ministry, and the various agencies, funds, and programs. So we would work on creating this plan in keeping with the national priorities, and then this information would be shared with the agencies, and then they would be able to craft certain interventions to be able to target these programs. And these country implementation plans usually run for a 2-year period, and they are the national implementing structure associated with a regional document called the multi-country Sustainable Development Cooperation Framework. Yeah, it's a mouthful.
You got it.
So let me ask before we continue. So we have to implement it and then they provide us with the monies?
No. I mean, it's a joint effort.
Okay.
It's a joint effort, right? But again, the country has to indicate what are the priorities, what are the areas that they need assistance, and then programs and interventions are designed and crafted to be able to meet these needs. And not only meet the needs, but to ensure that they actually reach the most vulnerable in our societies. Our youth, persons with disabilities, single mothers, these type of persons that really need the assistance. Hence why one of the key phrases or strategies within the UN system is leave no one behind. LNOB.
All right. So Denaula, you want to answer that part, or? in terms of the SDGs that you focused on at the summit, the SDG 6, 7, 9, 11, and 17.
Yes, what about them?
How was, well, I asked the focus that St. Kitts and Nevis review approach have on these. So how did you present them, or were these the major ones that you had to present at the forum that you were at?
So the United Nations typically sets a theme for each HLPF. The HLPF is an annual event. So every year there's a different theme, and with a different theme comes a different set of SDGs to focus on. So under this year's theme, these were the selected SDGs of focus. Our report touched on every SDG, but the focus of the United Nations was on those SDGs that you specified.
Okay, understand now.
And if I can add, I think we were lucky that those were the focus, because, as you know, water is a major issue with the public right now.
Yes.
And energy as well. We're going towards geothermal and solar. So it just coincided that, you know, those were the priority SDGs of the HLPF, but they were also very important for St. Kitts and Nevis. And so the delegation was led by Honorable Congress Maynard, being that those are under his ministry. And so we were able to speak about them, and, you know, it's just coincidental that those are very important for St. Kitts and Nevis, but they were also the priorities for the HLPF.
Okay, good stuff.
Just want to come back in there quickly, and just to give you the comfort that what I said earlier is not just, you know, a talk shop. We actually have a workshop and training ongoing right here, right now, with UNICEF and WFP, which is a World Food Program, collaboratively executing a workshop on shock responsive social protection. And basically, when we refer to shock responsive, it's social protection. This is basically identifying groups within your society that are the most vulnerable to certain shocks. So whether it's natural disasters, the impacts of COVID, increasing cost of living within society, these type of exogenous shocks that we are susceptible and vulnerable to, and assessing that in terms of how can we make our social protection policies more impactful and more targeted for these groups. So that workshop is actually ongoing right here, right now. You know? So they, you know, the agencies are on the ground, you know, engaging and working. Yes, yes.
Okay, so they're working for us.
Yes, and I must add, before we wrap up here, speaking on affordable and clean energy. So let's say St. Kitts Nevis finally tap into geothermal. We find it over Nevis and we tap into it. That's a good thing for the Federation. How will St. Kitts allocate funds to fund geothermal energy from the UN?
It's being funded right now by CDB and the Green Climate Fund. So that will take us through the well drilling phase and the establishment of a power plant. So once the resource, we get to the production phase, then we will look at other sources of support. So it's an ongoing process where there is a funder right now in CDB and the Green Climate Fund, but it's continuous. So if the UN is willing to provide support 2 years from now or any other, that's what we do at the Ministry of Sustainable Development. We seek partners, and the SDGs are all about partnership. So it's a continuous process where we're continuously seeking partners, because we don't want to put too much burden on the public budget to fund these initiatives, both in St. Kitts and Nevis. And so with Cosbert's support, of course, we welcome the support from the UN.
I like how it all goes back to Cosbert. And we are going to wrap up now because we're out of time. But Auren, you mentioned earlier that this is an avenue that persons can learn more about the SDGs. Any one of you can answer as well. Is there any place else that the public can go to learn about the SDGs so we can all be informed?
I'll let Cosbert wrap up on that, and then but the ministry will be establishing a website by next year, which will help to disseminate information. In the meantime, we will circulate the report to as many stakeholders as possible via email, but we should have a website coming online soon.
Continuing these type of engagements, the advocacy, working with different stakeholder groups. I mean, the question was posed earlier in terms of what can national stakeholders to get more involved. And we had a youth forum last month where we had a very interactive engagement, and they clamored to come to the table, to be involved in the decision-making process, and that was critical. And the last thing I would end with, or in that same video that you made mention of, please circulate it to Studio 3 to 7 so that they can play every morning, and ensure that persons are aware of the Sustainable Development Goals, the strides that have been made, and what is needed additionally to, take us to the next step.